My name is Marcel Wahba, and I'm the president of the Arab Gulf States Institute. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the Saudi Arabia Transforming Conference. And today's sessions, I believe, will be a very important opportunity for us to discuss all aspects of the Vision 2030. I would like to begin, however, with a word of special thanks to the Arabian Gulf Center for Iranian Studies and to Dr. Mohammed Al-Sulami for their support and assistance in organizing this conference. A year ago, the Kingdom embarked on a very ambitious program of national transformation with all the opportunities and challenges that entails. Vision 2030 goes well beyond a reform or restructuring plan to diversify the economy away from dependence on oil. I believe it is far more than that. What is outlined in Vision 2030 and the National Transformation Plan will have a much broader impact on the economic, social, political life of Saudi Arabia, both in the short and certainly in the long term. It's easy to be skeptical of such ambitious visions that require dramatic social change, that will threaten vested economic interests, and will inevitably challenge established ways of doing things. This kind of deep structural change is all the more difficult in a conservative, traditional society and culture. For all these reasons, this transformation will not be easy and will not be smooth, but it is absolutely necessary if Saudi Arabia hopes to secure a stable, prosperous future. For today's event, we have assembled a great group of experts to take a close look at the opportunities and challenges of Vision 2030 and to examine its implications for the Kingdom's domestic and regional strategies. I encourage all of you to actively participate in all the sessions with your questions and comments. A number of you are experts of the region and have traveled and lived there, so we do welcome not only your questions, but certainly your feedback and comments to what you hear on the stage today. We've invited His Excellency Dr. Abdulaziz Sagar, Chairman of the Gulf Research Center, to set the stage for today's conference with a brief overview, after which our own Hussein Ibish will join him for a conversation. Again, thank you all for joining us, and Dr. Abdulaziz, please welcome to the stage.
Right. So let's begin with the most pressing issue, and then we'll move on to a broader overview. President Trump is going to make his first overseas trip, and the first stop is Riyadh, beginning, we are led to believe, on the 19th, where he will meet with the Saudi government, with the GCC for what I imagine will be the third annual US-GCC summit, and then with a broader and as yet, as I understand it, not completely defined group of Arab and Muslim countries. Can you give us a kind of scene setter for the trip, and then we'll broaden the aperture and look at the 2030 national transformation.
First, I'd like to start by thanking Ambassador Marcel Wahba and colleagues at the Institute here for organizing such a gathering. It's always a pleasure to be in Washington, a city that I have left in it in the early 80s. I was in this town for some time. And again, the weather, it's helping us a lot, so it's a beautiful weather to enjoy in Washington. Definitely, we're all welcoming President Trump. I think it's going to be an important summit because he's not only going to meet King Salman and the Saudi official, but he's also going to meet the head of the GCC state, the other Gulf state, and also invitation has been extended to many of the members of the Islamic coalition on fighting terrorism. And that will bring a lot of leader, head of state, and to discuss. I'm sure there are various agenda and various issues, but if in the top of my mind, counter-terrorism and fighting terrorism will be in the top of the agenda. As the Saudi have taken an initiative for fighting terrorism by establishing the coalition, and it's a big coalition now with all the member states that participating in it, and the U.S. have endorsed it from the first day of the establishment. The U.S. have endorsed this coalition and put a big hope that this will bring a lot of cooperation. We all remember when the US started the coalition in fighting ISIS in Iraq. Saudi were the first to welcome that, and the meeting took place in Jeddah. In both levels, there was a religious fatwa to endorse that at that time, and there was a serious participation from the Saudi and other that have encouraged other Muslim country and other Arab country to participate in that. So I'm sure that will be a key in the top of the agenda. Economically, I'm sure the relation is fantastic. It's a great economic relation. We can only enhance it and expand it and make it bigger by both sides, by either investing in the US or US investment will come into there. I am sure we still have other agenda on the political dimension. We would like to discuss Yemen, we'd like to discuss Syria, which is important, the situation also in Iraq, and the expansionist issue with regard to Iran. President Trump came up with the 4 key issues when it comes to the policy toward Iran. He clearly defined terrorism as an issue, expansionist and interventionist policy of Iran as another issue, missiles as an issue, and also the 4th was the nuclear.
Yes.
And this is, of course, very much welcomed. And today we hear that the Russian foreign minister is in Washington and is meeting with the president. We hope the US will put enough pressure on the Russian to bring the Syrian crisis toward an acceptable settlement there.
Great. And now if we can step back for a second from that immediate agenda and sort of take a broader view. Saudi Arabia has launched a very ambitious series of restructuring and reform programs, the Vision 2030 program, and an even bigger national transformation plan. Can you sort of take a few minutes to set the stage for the rest of this conference and maybe describe, in general, where does Saudi Arabia want to go? For example, where do you think Saudi Arabia wants to be in 10 years' time? I think that might be a good way of kind of framing the entire sort of overview.
I think there is a serious transformation plan because the government have taken a necessary step toward the Vision 2030 and also the transformation of the 2020. To simplify it, I think there is key pillars in that one. Number one, the diversification. The government is planning to diversify from a single source of income, it used to be the oil, to a different source of income by opening up to the private sector, opening up for the foreign direct investment, opening up for a partnership, and a much better role for the government agencies or bodies that invest in domestically and outside. So diversification is important, reducing government involvement also, but bringing a better governance in terms of implementation there. There are many ambitious targets that have been set, and I'm sure the government are trying to follow up quite carefully, how those implementation will take place. The public-private, as we are meeting now, the discussion in Riyadh for the silos, for the wheat silos, going, in a serious discussion with regard to the privatization. Power plant, there is a discussion now going on with different power company to do an offtake or to buy the existing power plant and then revamp it, increase the capacity of that one. There's a discussion on the airport. Now 3 airports has been awarded to the private sector, Qasim, Hayal, Taif, and Medina before that. So there's already 4 airports being in place. I think this brings a very special opportunity for those whom they want to step in the market early. Don't wait too long when the prices are high and the other competitors. We've seen a great interest from the Japanese, the Chinese, some of the European, and some of the American company. But a simple advice, don't look at it a short term because health sector is a very attractive, but don't look at the health sector as something you want to invest in 2-3 years and then out of the market or have your exit strategy. Saudi Arabia will stay there and the country will be there and the opportunity will continue to be there. I think it's a great opportunity. At the same time, it's not a secret, it's in the public information. Government funds almost, they own close to 65% of the Saudi stock market. So they want to reduce also their participation on the Saudi stock market and give more chances to the other. I think with the clarity of vision there and the public-private partnership, it really brings a lot of special opportunity. And people can, maybe you have to identify it. You know, the mining is a sector, healthcare is another one, telecom it's another area, and airport and transport and infrastructure is another, you know, power, desalination, you know, there's a lot of, you know, key sector now being put into the, you know, private sector, you know, for the opportunity to invest in that.
Great. Now, building on that very ambitious sort of economic initiative to transform the Saudi economy, open it up, bring in investment outside, etc. What about the social aspects? Because many people have thought that there's inevitable implications for that have to do with probable social changes that will almost certainly result from these economic changes that you were talking about. Can you talk a little bit about that, where the nexus between economic change and social change comes about?
You can't bring an economic change without a political and social change. You know, this is very obvious. But you know, I'm glad to see that there is a lot of social change taking places. I'm glad here to see two of the Saudi, you know, nice ladies that are with us here. One of them, she's a member of the Shura Council. The other, of course, she's a great financial brain. You know, the banks will always pick up her brain for any good advice. You know, women participation in the society, it's there. And at the same time, you know, in Saudi Arabia, social change is three things you have to give us. First, gradual. Mm-hmm. Second, give us a little time, because you know it takes a little time to go through that one. And third, it has to come with our own beliefs from the inside. We do not like to see it imposed by a certain character or by a certain, you know, parameters that being, you know, categorized by somebody. It will happen, and it's happening. You know, we've seen women participation on the municipal council. We have a good number, I think probably higher than some of the other Arab or European country as a member of the Shura Council. At the same time, women are allowed to do business. Women today are a director of the Tadawul, the stock market in Saudi Arabia. Women are member today of a board of directors. So, you know, all of that, whether it's a women issue or the social transformation in terms of opening up. You know, when Saudi had the plan to send more than 250,000 students to study outside, you know, they're all coming. Alone in the US, between this year and next year, probably we'll have about 60,000 students coming back, male and female, you know, from finishing their study. You know, all of these people will support all this sort of economic and social transformation that is taking place. I'm quite optimistic about it because we can see it, you know, and again, you have a young leadership. Saudi Arabia today, if you look at the three different figures, if you're talking about under the age of 25, then you're talking at least more than 55. If you're talking about under the age of 45, then you're talking about 75% of the population. So we have a very young population willing to, you know, take up the lead. No changes will happen without difficulties, and no changes will happen without real challenges. But I think once you know, those challenges have been identified, we're willing to deal with it, you know. And the good thing, you have a government willing to adjust very quickly, you know, because of the young leadership we have. When you know, they saw it was important to cut down some of the benefit of the civil servant sectors, 7 months later, when the economic situation was better, they brought it back. So people, you know, had a better you know, situation with that one.
Great. Let's talk for a second about something you mentioned earlier, which is the Saudi-led Islamic anti-terrorism coalition. It's sort of in Kuwait right now. It's being formed, and it's coming together, starting to gel, new leadership, etc. Is it conceptualized as a sort of a coordination body that will bring together information and intelligence and policies and things like that? Or is it conceptualized as a force that would eventually be operational and actually conduct military missions in a joint way? I mean, where do you think this is going? What's the idea here?
I think the first part of the idea is to get an exchange of information between them, sharing of intelligence, as you clearly defined it in a military language, but at the same time also have a proper media, you know, and monitoring. And Saudi Arabia, by the way, have established a very special center called Marsad, that follow up exactly all what happened in the social media that related to counter-terrorism issues. So they are able to identify the potential, the connection, the linkage between, because social media has been heavily used. So the cyber issue is part of that also, coalition. And they have what they call the moderate Islam approach, which is talking to the different Muslim country to try to bring the moderate Islam, which is anti-violence, extremism, and radicalism. But at the same time, they are going to establish a special unit to support those countries whom they need, and that need. This is why we have had, the ex-Pakistani head of the army, General Rahil, to be also in that position as a commander of the military unit. It's going to require some time until you put it, but it's a coalition of the willing. And the coalition of the willing in fight terrorism. Terrorism today, globally, it's a real threat, and not only to the US and to us. I mean, we have suffered from terrorism, and we are trying to do our best. Saudi Arabia have taken a very serious steps in terms of first calling for the biggest conference that took place in Riyadh, but as a result of that, we supported the foundation of an excellent center at the United Nations with a donation of $110 million to start that center. We have established all international agreement that can be in places in the collaboration. And the day when Saudi were able to pass an intelligence sharing information with the United States to prevent, a crisis happening, they have taken that. Terrorism in Saudi Arabia have been combated, but unfortunately in a failing or semi-failing state in the neighborhood, we have seen departure from that to those countries. Today you have a situation in Iraq, Syria, Libya, Somalia, Yemen. They're all incubator of terrorism. So what we need to continue is to have the global effort, to combat and fight terrorism.
Let's explore that a little bit more. The regional situation remains pretty unstable and quite tense, and the Defense Minister and Deputy Crown Prince recently made some very pointed statements about Iran and its official ideology and the potential for dialogue. And I'm wondering if you can give us your sense of what Saudi Arabia's regional role is right now, and what's its general regional posture.
The difference between Saudi Arabia and some of the regional countries, there is a very simple issue. We have no ambition or interest in any country, economics or political or even expansions there. Second, we are not exporting any sort of ideology. A country like Iraq and Syria and Lebanon have left with, Muslim and non-Muslims also, inhabitant. And we have no economics, something we would like to catch it from there or get it from their side. So, but at the same time, I think the Deputy Crown Prince, when he clearly defined the policy of Saudi Arabia, which is not accepting any interventionist policy in our affairs. In other words, if Iran have used the sectarianism as a dimension to expand their spheres of territorial interest, this is no longer acceptable, for us. If they have established their intelligence cells in Bahrain and Kuwait, this is not, and Saudi Arabia, this is not acceptable, and we are going to deal with that. If they have used the sectarian dimension to expand in Africa, like on the Horn of Africa or the Sub-Sahara, we will go to those countries and explain the Iranian policy and the Iranian ambitious, to expand that one. I think to the point he said, if they will fight us inside, we will go directly to wherever the threat will come to. I'm sure he doesn't mean that to launch a war against Iran, but again, to contain that sort of, aggression and to contain such a policy. We would still would like, I always say we cannot change Quiche Island by having Salzburg, We wish maybe Salzburg is more interesting, particularly those whom they saw the movie Sound of Music when they were young, But we can't change, geography. We can't change the geopolitical. We would like to have a friendly Iran, in the neighborhood. We would like Iran to focus on the domestic issue, on the development of their country, and not to use the sectarianism as a dimension for their expansionists. I mean, look at today, Hezbollah. They have, destroyed the situation in Lebanon. They have, in 2014, they have panicked the country there. At the same time, they have delayed the appointment of the president of Lebanon. Look at, with the Houthi in the south, they brought a violent non-state actor, support them to overtake a state and to throw a legitimate government. Look at in everywhere they have been, supporting, because Iran somehow felt It's easy to deal with militia, not to deal with the central government. And I think if the international community will not support the sustainability and the continuity of a central government, that can fight all these violent non-state actors, we are going to live with the difficulty. Iraq today, it's a very serious situation. You have al-Hashd al-Sha'bi, 37 Shia militia have been established, supported by Iran. At the same time, you have the Iranian Revolution Guard commanders attending and ruling the situation in Iraq, while he's in the list and Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi in the list, but somehow nobody's talking about that. You have a Minister of Interior in Iraq who come from the militia, being a Minister of Interior who's supposed to fight terrorism and so on. So I think the international effort, and this is why we're looking forward for President Trump policies that he have laid down to be implemented and not only to talk about it, because the message was sent to Syria was quite important message by the US, and we hope those messages will go just beyond targeting part of an air base to a really combating militia, which equally for me they're the same like the terrorist group. Unfortunately, in some of the European countries they don't look at it that way. They still look at the political wing of Hezbollah or the military wing of Hezbollah. I think Hezbollah is the same. Their role in destroying and impacting the situation is the same.
Which you anticipated my next question, but I think there's still plenty of room to explore it, which is there seems to be a really kind of solidification between in the American-Saudi relationship now that President Trump has come into the White House. How do you evaluate the overall relationship, and do you think there's a change of tone, a real change of policies? And just give us a sense of your
definitely you have suffered.
It's a little early, I know.
No. I mean, definitely you have suffered from two different, policy in the U.S. One is the whole, case of Iraq. U.S. going to Iraq in 2003. I mean, look at today, 2017. Did it really brought democracy or a better economic situation or even a security stability in Iraq? No. Unfortunately, the big slogan that we're bringing democracy, we're bringing situation, it did not happen. At the same time, we have suffered from the policy of reluctancy that, President Obama. I mean, President Obama, unfortunately, brought the three things to us. He brought the Islamic State, ISIS, his policy. As a result of that, we have the Islamic State there. He brought to us the Iranian imperial power on the region, and he brought the Russian back. Today we are pleased to see somebody trying to undo such a policy that was there and try to deal with the issue quite differently. I think we're still hopeful to see those statements pre-election, post-election to be implemented and not only talked about it. I'm sure it's not easy in putting resources and forces to deal with the difficult situation on the region. But at the same time, I think the vested and the vital interests of the U.S. with the region, particularly the Gulf, who have been a very loyal and good friends, not only today, it started in 1935, when the first Standard Oil of California, start working on our part of the world.
I'd like to close by asking about two potential points of tension with the United States. One is President Trump's repeated suggestions during the campaign and recently that Saudi Arabia doesn't pay its fair share, which I find extraordinary. But I mean, is there a plan in Riyadh to kind of change to maybe look at the books and actually examine the numbers and perhaps correct that rather extraordinary statement? And the other thing that's out there is JASTA is unchanged. JASTA is on the back burner. It's not going to come up in a court anytime immediately, and yet it's still there. So if you can just touch on those two issues, and then we'll close out.
I think on the economic side, we have never changed using the dollar as a base for our key product, which is oil. We have not encouraged any other country that were trying to use dollar, use another currency or form another. You remember at the Brexit in 2008, Saudi Arabia have refused. We have, we're still keeping our money on the USD bills. The majority of it is in the USD bills. So I think, and we are continuing the development, whether in Saudi Arabia or supporting other country by using majority. The US still is the largest trade partner, you see, with us. So I think we have not changed our, position in terms of the economic relation. At the same time, we are willing to take our fair share of the cost. You see, when the U.S. participated in the first Gulf War, 1990-91, we paid our fair share to that one because we did ask them to help to liberate Kuwait. But when the U.S. decided themselves in 2003 and to go into Iraq and spend $1 trillion, you know, we were not happy with that decision at that time. We thought there is a different way of handling it to keep Iraq, you know, integrity and autonomy together. However, I'm sure today, since we are all going to be fighting terrorism and working together, we will pay our fair share. But what is the fair share need to be discussed, you see, between. I mean, it's not a secret. Saudi is the largest, you know, defense buyer, defense equipment buyer from the U.S. And I think because we needed to protect, we have a large country, huge border, many threats on the north and in the south, so we need to do that. So I'm sure the discussion of the fair share, the Saudi and the Gulf to participate on the cost of the war and terrorism, it will be there, and we're not going to step back from our physical participation. We have been part of the coalition and the operation, and from our financial liability.
Okay, great. Any thoughts on JASTA, or do you want to?
Well, on just that, it's a pity what happened. Honestly, I think you know, Saudi, as usual, we don't have a lobbyist in Washington to act and to work, you know, early before things have happened. Unfortunately, what happened, it happened. You know, we're still hoping, you know, that we will work in it, and then gradually we will do a proper change. You know, these things might be revisited and to be dealt with. Saudi is not being guilty of doing it. The government never supported any sort of people for to make such an act. These cells, they were in Hamburg, they were in Germany, they were not in Saudi Arabia, and they came and they left in the U.S. They were part of your, you know, the people and inhabitant living here. You know, you the one who was supposed to, you know, discover their operation. When we were asked about the detail, most of these people, they were not in Saudi, and they were never in Saudi for years. But you know, I'm still hopeful because. Again, you know, we sympathize with the family and with the, you know, the victims of the September 11 tragedy. But at the same time, if the government is not responsible for such things, and I think if you know, I'm not so sure that is going to work globally. You know, for different countries and different issues, there's a lot of legal dimension to that.
Lots of implications. Well, thank you so much for a great overview. Really appreciate it. And joining in, thank you. And we really appreciate you coming. Thank you very much.